I've been in photography for probably about 45 years, and I'm only 46, so. Oh, well, a little older than that. I started out with a Canon FTB camera. Does anybody even recognize that name? Canon FTB was a film camera. I got my first camera right a little time after we got married back in '68, and my brother was over in Vietnam, and I heard you could get cheap cameras if you ordered through the military, so I got my Canon FTB through that, and I shot that for quite a while. After about 10 years, I got really interested in photography and decided to shoot a wedding, and boy, that was scary. And I shot, well, my wife and I, we shot about 35 years worth of weddings at about 15 weddings a year. So one thing you better know how to do is you better know how to pose people and expose them properly, or else nobody's going to hire you. So, you know, I don't consider myself an expert on lighting people, but I have learned a few things over the year. Hopefully, you can get something out of this. I've also taught college for kids in photography, just some basics like that. And I do all of the Augustana alumni pictures. I've done a lot of little leagues, family pictures, and so forth. Right now, I do just Augustana, and that's it, because I've been retired for about 10 years. And boy, I don't want to chase brides around anymore. They move too fast, and I don't move that fast anymore. And on March 15th this year, I had a triple bypass, so you know, I'm not quite moving as fast as I used to move, but I'm feeling pretty good right now. The gal in the lower right there, that was my college for kids. When you pose people, you know, find props. I'm big into using trees, and especially, I love evergreen trees, especially where the light can go through them and you get that nice light. This one here is, some of you know him, that's Bob Nelson. He was in our other camera club, and I don't think he's in any camera club now, but these people over here, Dan Holtz, some of you know Dan from the other camera club. In fact, he comes to this one too. Those are his grandchildren, and I took that over in by Geneseo. I like to use foliage in the background. Now, this time of the year, about the only foliage you're going to get is evergreen trees, and most people aren't going to take pictures this time of year. This one, believe it or not, I took at Chick-fil-A. It's my granddaughter, and I took it with my iPhone. I'm embarrassed. Seems like I'm embarrassed to say that anymore, but anyway, but some news came in today that I wasn't even aware of, and I found out that we almost didn't have our president tonight at the meeting. And we all love Jay Brooks. This thing wouldn't run without Jay Brooks, but I got some inside information on him today, and he was over at the new Hertz donut shop, and he said, he almost missed it. He was there for 3 hours shooting. I don't know what he shot for 3 hours, but he claims that he didn't have but one donut. And he had to have Judy come over, drag him home to get him here. He only lives like 5 minutes from this place. Drag him home to get him to the meeting tonight. And Judy, what did he say about those donuts he ate?
That the holes were good because there's no calories and there's no carbohydrates.
There you go. So didn't matter how many he ate because there's no carbohydrates or calories in the middle of them. But there he was shooting. I don't know. He was holding one and eating one. It was hard to get that shot, but we have cameras everywhere, Jay. Okay, now back to our original program. Good lighting. You got available light and you got flash. And when I shot weddings, I would say 90% of my shots were with flash. But if you looked at them, you wouldn't know it. The secret is using flash, making it subtle enough that it fills in shadows, but it doesn't look flashy. And that means there's not big harsh shadows and so forth. Available light is beautiful, but it's a little harder to do, and you got to have fast lenses. You get really low depth of field, and they're a lot tougher to do. What does really good light look like? All you have to do is watch some Hallmark Christmas movies. Those have the most beautiful light. I took this off the TV screen. Look at the beautiful hair light over here. It's got a little S curve here. It's a little darker to give you three-dimensional. Catch lights in the eyes always make the eyes light up. It looks like they had a little kicker, a little blue light over here. And then their backgrounds are gorgeous because you got all these out of focus lights. I think those are diaphragm blades that are out of focus. And all their movies, they have all these out of focus. I love watching them. I mean, it's usually a guy and a girl that hate each other at the beginning, and then they start liking each other until the last half hour, then they have a fight, and then in the last 5 minutes they're kissing and they go off together. So they're all the same, but I just love, just the lighting alone, it's just so beautiful. Here's another one. You can just see, they're just gorgeous lighting. You got this, what they call an S curve here, and you know, I wish I could light everything like that, but you know very well we can't do that. There's another one. They say it costs for a Hallmark movie $2 million for a movie. Now, if you had $2 million, you could probably get light like that too. Just hire about 10 people to go around with you and light your subject, and you'd be okay. But most of us don't have $2 million bucks. Maybe a Speo does, but the rest of us don't. Now, I used to get that kind of lighting too. This is First Communion St. Paul's. I used to do their First Communion pictures. And that, believe it or not, is only two lights. I had a hair light, and I had a light coming from the far right. And this is, if you look at it close up, you can see my light was at about a 1:30. You get a nice catch light. That always makes the eyes light up. So that's another reason to use flash, because you get the eyes just light up. And then this is called modeling over here. You want it to be a little darker on one side than the other, and it really gives three-dimensionality. But, you know, I had to bring with me that or an umbrella. Usually I use an umbrella. That's a soft box. And I had this triggered the softbox here. And then I usually had a reflector, these big reflectors. I'm not sure what I did with the one, but they look like a big chunk of white material they hold up. And I had one of those on like on this side of her face to fill in so that wasn't real dark over there. But that was mounted on the lights. I mean, it took me 45 minutes to set up. Now, you know doggone good and well, you go over to somebody's house for Christmas, are you going to take this stuff with you? No, most of you probably don't have it. I have it, but I'm not going to take it over to my son's house on Sunday. They get mad at me anyway because they are so tired of me taking pictures of them for the last 40 years that they don't want. So I don't end up doing that. That's what I call A-plus lighting. That's really good lighting, but 95% of us, we're not going to get lighting like that because we don't have the time or effort to do stuff like that. We're not going to set up like that. At weddings, I'd put the light off to one side and I could trigger it remotely, and then I'd get a little modeling on them, and it made for some really pretty lights at weddings. But that was kind of for some special stuff. For my average shots, they were not like that. I used to shoot student recognition at West High School, and I would do the same setup. And I got some kind of pretty lights. These are kids that about 60 or 70 kids that teachers nominated because they did a good job in their classroom. Camera Corner gave us 8x10s. They'd give us like 60 or 70 8x10s for free. And we put them up in the showcase, and we did this about, I think, 4 times a year. And I mean, I got pretty darn good lighting. That was just some fabric I got at the fabric store. I just did these in my room. Okay, that's even beyond what most of us can do. Now, if you watch Channel 8, that's what I call flat lighting. The lighting over here and over here, it's the same on each side. And that's what most of us get, right? And, you know, she's probably got a little extra hair light on her. But for the most part, that's the kind of pictures we're going to get. We're going to just flat lighting. At weddings, I would use a little bounce flash, and I would get very little shadows. I usually try to keep people maybe 4 or 5 feet from the wall. So if you're taking pictures at Christmas, keep them away from the wall. If possible, with your flash, try to bounce it. Get a bounce card. I'll show you what that is in a little bit here. Now, I took these last week at Pleasant Valley Elementary School. Anybody ever been to one of their big Christmas plays or programs? Oh man, I tell you, the people really go there. This is a friend of mine, Jason Cook, who sometimes comes to our meetings. That's his daughter. I was about 70 feet away, and that's another friend of mine. Her name's Molly Butcher, and I had her dad on my Little League team, I don't know, about 30 years ago. And I just took pictures of him because my own granddaughter was there, and so I thought I'd take pictures and just give them to him. But this is flat lighting, but who cares, you know? Everybody, I mean, he loved the pictures. I gave these to Grandma. They love them. They don't say, could have been better lighting, you know? They love them. Flat lighting is what most of us are going to get. And there's nothing wrong with flat lighting as long as you're well exposed and you got good colors. Nobody really cares about that. Then I took little Butcher's picture, little Molly, and I dressed it up a little. In Photoshop, I put a little border around, that's called a stroke line, put her name in the corner. And that was all cropped from 70 feet away. And here's what the original picture looked like. That's what I got it out of. All these bald-headed guys like me back here, they didn't add any to the picture. The only way I could get rid of these guys is get on a ladder, and that place was stuffed. There was no place. So that's as high as I could get, but I knew I could pull her out of there. So cropping is very important. I mean, almost every picture that I took at weddings, and when I was doing digital weddings, we'd take about 500 pictures at a wedding, and virtually every picture had to be color corrected, cropped, and we used what you call an unsharp mask on them to make it sounds funny, but it means it makes them sharper. And but cropping is a real key there. That was a 5D Mark IV and 70 to 200 lens, ISO 400. So some of the cameras really enlarge well nowadays. So when we're talking about light, as I mentioned before, available light can be room light, sunlight, some other artificial light source. That's my little grandson quite a few years ago. He's playing a little Nintendo game. Well, they give off light, and if you catch them just right when they're not paying attention to you, you can use that light for a light. So use that. Another one, my nephew's little boy, I use that light. And what kid doesn't have a cell phone nowadays? And they light up. In fact, when I was teaching, I could always tell I had the lights off and I was doing something with the lights off. I could always tell people would have shiny faces because I knew they had their phones down there on, and so I always could tell who had theirs. But they make kind of neat light sources. One of the problems is kids get a little older, like over 10, between 10 and 15. And what I found out with my own grandkids is their favorite thing to do is photobomb my pictures. So 3/4 of the pictures for a while, right before I take it, they stick their tongue out. Anybody have any grandkids that like to do that? Mine seem to do that. And I got 2 of them one of them's 2 and one of them's 5. They haven't learned that trick yet. But the older ones stick their tongue out, and every once in a while I can get a good picture of them, but it's usually candid pictures. You can't, available light, you really have to have the kid kind of posing for it. And but think of some creative ways. Even the Christmas tree lights sometimes will give you enough light on the person's face that you can do a pretty good those are available light shots there. Here's one I think this was my little nephew Henry when he was real young, but you notice you get that little S curve. That's over by a light source. Sometimes you might have to hold a little white card or some white object over there, a reflector they call them. So this doesn't get, you don't want this to be black over here. You want a little detail in there. But that would be considered, that's almost as good as the lighting that you get on the Hallmark movies. And that's just window light. Window light can be beautiful. It's kind of tough, and sometimes you get one side that's burned out a little bit. So you got to kind of be careful of that. This is one I think I showed you at the beginning. Here we're at Chick-fil-A, and I see this, and I thought, I don't have my camera with me. Any of you ever run into that? But I have my iPhone 10, I guess that's the model number I have now. And so I took her picture, and I thought, man, I can't believe how sharp these iPhones are nowadays. But I didn't particularly like that gal sitting in the background. She was nice, but I didn't want her in my picture. So here's where you really got to get the old crop out, and cropping is so important. So if we crop that, now, you like that better? Okay, now we got rid of the gal in the background, and little Quinn, that's her name, Quinn. Look at the light there. Isn't that beautiful? You got modeling just like on those movie lights, little catch light, and a nice smile. The hair lights up pretty well. The only thing that you might say, well, could be slightly better if you did what? What would you take out? You don't like the red, those two red things? I don't like it either. Those flowers are okay, they're not too bad. So you can do this. Now I just, in Photoshop, I went around her head with the little dotted lines called selecting, and then I used a radial blur out here, and then I used another kind of a blur. Well, eventually I got rid of everything out there and ended up with, and then I took a little eyedropper that you have in Photoshop, and I put it on her coat here, and then I made a border around that matched her coat. And so for an iPhone picture, I thought, geez, that's awfully good. And I got all this money in these really nice cameras, and I get that good of a picture out of an iPhone. But iPhones are, well, Androids too are the other kind, right? And they're, from what I hear, they're just as good or better, some of them. Some of the Samsungs, they say, are fantastic. I think one of the keys is to get up close. We don't want pictures full length usually. Most of the time, the pictures you really like are the close-up pictures. These are a couple relatives, and she wasn't, but that was from quite a while. That one was a little bit of a Hallmark type picture with the lights out of focus in the background, and I kind of like that one. Slow shutter speed. One of my favorite, I used to use this on brides all the time. I didn't use it on guys, on the grooms, because it made their skin look a little too smooth, and most guys want to be a little more rough. They don't want to have, but look at this, and look at this. And what it does, the smart blur keeps the highlights, like the eyes stay sharp, but the skin just goes really silky. You can even make it silkier, but sometimes it starts to look kind of fakey if you make it too silky. That's, I took 100% and then I dialed it back to 70%, and that's what I got. And this, to me anyway, looks a lot better. It hides any skin flaws, and brides used to love that. Every time I put that effect on, and they had a choice, they would always choose that rather than the other one. Flash indoors. This is what probably a lot of you are going to use right now. Keep the people away from the background if you can. I would say 3 feet away from the background, typical. A little more is not too bad. And I like to bounce flash if possible. And now I have to admit that I'm guilty of just using the little flash that pops up a lot of times. We'll run over to my son's house in LeClaire, and the kids are around, and I'm popping away with my my wife's SL1. Do you have that out there, Joanne? I don't know. It looks just like that, except it's white. Just a little Rebel camera. But it's real convenient. And a lot of times, we want convenience, right? And, you know, you're going to get flat lighting. You're not going to get real model lighting. That's not what you call hallmark lighting on that. But if you keep her far enough away from the background, the shadows are fairly light. And since I'm a little bit taller than Blake's about 5'5", that's my daughter-in-law, if I get her back from the background, or if I get a little further away, that shadow will drop right out and you won't even see it anymore. But you got a tendency to get red eye. The reason is the flash is about 3 inches over the lens. And what that does is it enables you to see the blood vessels in the back of their retina, and that's called red eye. Super easy to correct in Photoshop, but it does take time if you got a lot of people in a picture. Telephoto lenses tend to get more red eye than just your normal lenses. I couldn't tell you why. It has to do with the field of view, I think. But so telephoto lenses, you'll get a lot of red eye. For example, Pleasant Valley last week when I was shooting all the Christmas programs. Well, let me show you this one first. If you just put a big flash on like this and you turn it vertical, that to me is a nasty shadow there. I don't like that at all. And that's what you want to stay away from. Even if you get a little ways away from the wall, you're still going to get those nasty shadows. You do better if you use it horizontally and then crop it vertically in Photoshop or Lightroom. But this is a picture that I took last week, and I counted up 20 little kids, first graders, 20 out of 20 had red eye. So that means that I had to go through, and in Photoshop, there's a little plus, and you put it on their red, and it turns it black. Now, but you have to do it 40 times. So I can correct all those, but I don't want to correct them all. And there was the only one I was really interested in, but I corrected hers. I think I ended up correcting all of them, but it took a while. There is a way of eliminating that if you use, hold on a second if I can see this in the dark. Yeah, this is all right. If you can put your flash on a bracket like this, and there's a cord that connects to your camera, to the hot shoe, to here, to your flash, that will eliminate a lot of the red eye. And I used to use this at weddings, but I'm getting lazy anymore. If I go over and take pictures, usually I don't mess around with a bracket. These strobo frame brackets, I think, at Camera Corner are probably about $30, right, Doug? Doug here still? Yep, right here. Would you say about 30 or 40 bucks? Yep, about 30. Yeah, they're nice to have. You can eliminate the red eye with that, but I just correct it usually in Photoshop, and I don't hardly ever use this anymore. At weddings, I use it all the time, but I kind of got away from using that. Now, in the camera, there's a built-in little card. Now, I'm a Canon guy, so I don't know Nikon stuff, so I'll have to talk to Rewerts or somebody in here that's a Nikon guy. Do you guys have little cards built into your flashes? Yes. Okay, you Nikon people do. That actually works pretty well. I keep it horizontal, like I said, and I get pretty light shadows. Further I get Blake away from the wall, the softer the shadow is. So that works pretty well. Or you can make your own. Now, this was a very extensive project. I had to get a note card, and I had to cut it. And then I used a rubber band to put it on there. Now, this is probably 3 times bigger than that, and the fact is it works just as well. Now, if you feel bad that you didn't buy it from Nikon or Canon, with Canon you can put a red ring around the top and put the word Canon and tell people you spent $50 for it. But this works pretty well. And then I shoot almost everything horizontal because I think I get less shadows. Try about a 45, 60 degree angle. That's what I was using on your group over here today. It was about a 45-degree angle, maybe a little more than that. All your group pictures with Santa Claus today were taken that way. You can buy one of these, LumaQuest they're called. They used to have a Velcro. Can you see that? That's Velcro. That was a pain in the butt. Because guess what? You always lose it, right? You have it, and as soon as you need it, you lose it. And I would say Doug, do they still sell those?
Yeah, they still have those.
Yeah, I don't use that anymore at all because there's such an easy way to do it. They work well. This is what I use now. All that is just a flat. Now that side's silver, the other side is white, and it's got its own built-in elastic strap. You just strap it onto your flash, and you're all set. That one cost me $7, and they're inexpensive. Doug, do you sell those? Camera Corner?
We do, but the brand that we have is Rogue, and they're a little more expensive because they have soft little rods in them that you can.
Oh, okay.
But I know what you're talking about there.
Yeah. Well, I would highly recommend you get them at Camera Corner. We'll keep our camera store alive. So buy them over there. I got that online, but they're really inexpensive overall. Now this is a bunch of stuff here. Sunday. We're gonna have our Christmas in over by in Bettendorf there at my son's house, and I will probably set my camera for probably 100th to 200th of a second. And I'm going to set it at f8 because f8, you get really good depth of field, and it's one of the sharpest part of almost any lens. f5, 6, f8 are usually the sharpest part of the lens. And I'm not shooting available light. When these kids are opening presents and the paper's flying in the air and all that kind of stuff, I want a decent shutter speed, and I'm going to shoot all these probably with just a little flash reflector on there, like that $10 one I just showed you. I'll shoot all the pictures like that, and I'll probably shoot them on manual, about 1/4 power, and I'll have a zoom lens so I can stay the same distance from the person. Like if I want to use 1/4 power and I want to get closer, I just zoom in, but I stay the same distance. So you can stay in one spot if you have a zoom lens, and you can just zoom back and forth and use the same power. You can try using automatic, but I never trusted automatic at weddings. And I mean, if I had a bride and dad coming down the aisle, I set it on 1/4 power, no bounce at all, because you can't bounce it off of most ceilings like this, too high. So I had straight flash in the aisle. I wasn't worried about any shadows in the background, because usually the background is way back there. But the last thing I wanted the Canon flash to do is determine how much light to put out. I wanted a definite amount of light every time, and in about 30 years coming down the aisle, I never missed a bride and dad coming down the aisle because I didn't have it on the right flash setting. So manual I like. You can try automatic and see if you like it. And I always shoot RAW and large JPEG. Most of the time I'll correct things in JPEG, but you'd be surprised if I shot one of Jay Brooks here at full power at about 10 feet away and blasted him out, you couldn't save that in most JPEGs. But I can take a RAW and probably produce a pretty good image. So if coming down the aisle, the bride and dad, I would probably get maybe 3 or 4 shots. And usually the last one they'd only be like 3 feet away. Well, no, more like 7 feet away from me. And those were almost always way blown out. But in RAW, you can save them. JPEG, not a prayer. So if you've never used JPEG before, you get better colors, more colors. You can correct. My wife is good at Photoshop, and she's really doesn't do much photography, but she always uses RAWs when she's correcting. She's pretty good at Photoshop. She just doesn't do a lot of photography, but she always tells me shoot raw. I shoot them both. That way I can make a choice. And I process all my pictures in Photoshop. A lot of people use Lightroom. Well, I'm not smart enough to learn 2 programs, so I just use Photoshop because I got used to it and I know how to do it. And as Brooksy knows, I love to make montages, or for him, it's collages. But, and I can't do that in Lightroom, I don't think. And I like layers and all that kind of stuff. So I do, after a wedding, you know, it would take me 50 to 30 hours to correct all the pictures in a wedding, but every picture got color corrected, sharpened, and cropped. And I would end up usually with 200, 250 probably at the end. But I think the key for most of you guys is take a lot of pictures, because you know doggone good and well, other people that aren't photographers, they'll come up with pictures that are questionable. They're not all that good. And you guys in the room here are all good photographers. And some, you know, some are better than others, but you guys wouldn't be in here if you weren't at least decent photographers. So, you know, they're going to all want your pictures probably. This is my daughter-in-law, Blake, and see what happens. If you got a gal by herself, don't put her straight to camera. That makes her shoulders look like she's ready to start weightlifting. Turn them a little bit. Same girl, looks thinner there, doesn't she? And Blake isn't chubby. She's a nice-looking gal, but always turn them. Don't try your best to keep people turned a little bit. I don't always do it myself. Sometimes I forget, or if I'm in a hurry, I'll do that. And watch your backgrounds. You don't want poles coming out of their head, right? The nice thing about it is it's easy to correct in Photoshop. How many of you use content-aware fill? Anybody? If you've never heard of that before and you use Photoshop, you got to use that. That is probably my favorite new filter in the last 5 years from Photoshop. What it does is you put a little square around an object and it will turn it into whatever's around it. So exit signs, piece of cake. Stuff like that are really easy to remove. Okay, like for example, I take pictures at Augustana. These were a couple, it's parent weekend, and this is a couple that just happened to be going together. And I had that hot spot over there. I put a little rectangular marquee tool around that. And this is all I did. Took me 30 seconds. And this is what it looked like. Just disappears. The only thing I'd do different on them is put his feet a little closer together. And then I just love evergreen trees, but you got to watch out if they're too dense. Like I don't like this down here, but I like diffuse evergreen trees, make absolutely beautiful backgrounds. And that's kind of what I look for. This is up at the president's house at Augustana College, and luckily he's got a couple nice spots for pictures. That's the so-called slough at Augustana College. That was my son's engagement picture. Keep heads together. I probably could have cropped that one in a little bit. Now, also keep in mind how they're related. Can you tell which one's brother and sister? Yeah, most brothers are not going to let their sisters sit on their lap. There's brother and sister. And I might have to admit that a lot of my posing comes from my wife. She comes up with some really neat poses. And that was, actually, her mother does my wife's hair. So they both went to North and same time. So we thought we'd get a picture for Mom. And this is just a couple here. And a couple you can get a little bit closer together. They don't mind. Brother and sister would not like that shot. Keep in mind how people are related when you take their pictures. I think that's grandma, that's mom, and that's the son, and I love that background, that diffuse evergreen background. So make sure you know the relationships and put them in such. Don't do like I've done at a few weddings, try to have mom and dad hold hands and they're divorced. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. You got to be careful. And then if you get a group of 3, try to form a little triangle. Now, if I had her stand up, what do you think would happen? Wouldn't look very good. She would be up a foot higher, and her head would be about up in the blue area here. So try to keep that little triangle going. Keep the head like that. And these are ones for like family weekend at Augustana. And so you got a bunch of little triangles here. And I try to keep the heads together. And I could have these three stand up, but it doesn't make as good a picture. In fact, I usually do. I'll have them stand on one, and I'll have them, I call it scrunch down, and then I'll let them look at my viewfinder, and 9 out of 10 times, they will pick the scrunch one. These guys, the only one I don't like here are the little girls looking away, but they like this one so well, they got a hold of the alumni office at Augustana, got my email address, and wanted to know if they could get a bigger picture. So on their wall, they have a 16 by 20 of this picture, or is it 20 by 24? They got a great big one. They just love the picture. And you notice we got all the heads together. Anybody recognize that guy? Weatherman on Channel 8, James Zahara. And that's his daughter, who I guess is a fantastic swimmer. But they got the old scrunch move. Their parents at Augustana. Background there, not the greatest. It's a little dark for me, but it worked okay. You can have them all get it. Try to get levels if you have a fairly big group. That's not my favorite pose in the world. It was okay. You can bring them down and do the little scrunch move. And usually if you put them in that condition like that, they smile. You don't have to tell them to smile. They get their heads all together and they smile. Wedding groups, I used to do the same thing. That's one pose you never have to tell them to smile. They get their heads together and they all start smiling. I don't know what it is. It just that just makes them smile. That's the same one. I like to have them, if you have this choice, and you don't often have a choice, try to wear solid colors where they all go together. Renee is my friend. I used to teach next to her. She had short sleeves on, and I didn't like it. So I made her long sleeves in Photoshop. And so now she fits in perfectly. Background's a little dark, but not bad. That's a single flash off camera. And then Caitlin over here, she's one of my nephew's little girls. Had a pattern there. It doesn't look too bad, but we had her switch. And she's got this now. I don't know, maybe to you guys it's not a big deal. It probably isn't a big deal, but I like to coordinate them a little bit better than that. Here, this is all dark. You got different levels, you got triangles. That one there is close to like a perfect family picture. You notice a little shadow on the side of her face. That means off camera flash. I had that box on this one off to one corner. Tried to angle them all in. Jay, should I stop? Am I going too far? Time-wise?
You got about 6 minutes.
Okay, that's about how long. My brother-in-law and his little grandchildren, if I would have stayed down at their level, I'd been shooting into a fence in the background. So sometimes if you get up high enough, you can shoot back into the grass. And so your height can have an effect on what background you got. I thought that background there was better than the nasty fence they had back there. And then we put leaves all around them, and they really liked it. In fact, they used that for their Christmas card, I think. Stay away from harsh sunlight. You ever get a picture like that? You don't want that. If you get harsh sunlight, turn their back to the sun. This is taken within 5 minutes of the last one, but I turned Blake's head to the back. Now you have to hit her face, either get a big reflector to put some light in her face. That's probably what they do in Hollywood. Or take a flash and shoot a flash here to fill it in. And then now, yeah, that's flat lighting, but that's the kind of lighting most of us want. We just want, we're not too concerned about modeling and that. And so put light behind them. Direct sunlight is kind of hard to shoot in. There I did the same thing. I put the sun to their back. And that's a really nice tulips over at Vanderveer Park one year. and I put them right in the middle of the tulips, and I thought that looked pretty good. The hair light on them is especially good. I think that one's in high school now. And this was just like a engagement picture. I turned their backs to the light, because then you get this hair light and this, you notice there's kind of a light around their edge of their shoulders. That's called rim light, and I like that. Yeah, the beer bottle probably didn't add to the picture. I could have taken it out, I suppose. I didn't bother to do it, though. And then they used to have at Vanderveer some really nice grass as you went in there, but they killed it all off and put something else in there. But that makes for a nice background. Here again, it's backlit, as you can tell. Sometimes you want your pictures to tell a story. Now, this story didn't have a good ending. She's 11 years old now, and he's in PV high school, but she wanted to play the game, and well, you can imagine what happened there. And here, if you can catch the emotions, we don't care what the lighting looks like, as long as it's, you know, good lighting and nice and sharp. That's his sister there. That's little Jack. And that's some girl. I don't know who it was. One of Caitlin's buddies. They both decided to get in a kiss, and just his eyes and opening his mouth with no teeth. I just think that's just a great little picture. Or if you go to John Deere, find a prop. Just put them inside of the tractor wheel. That made for a kind of a neat prop. Dogs, you know, pets. You can add them to pictures and get some kind of cute combinations there. These are some really unusual perspectives. This couple wanted this picture, and I don't know, it looked like something you'd see down at Esther Dolls or something. I mean, to me, that looks kind of spooky. But they wanted it. I'd never taken a picture like that before. This one, Dan Holtz, you guys know Dan Holtz, some of you, right? Out in Geneseo. These are all his grandchildren. And I got up high enough where I could shoot down on them. If you try this, put the strap on your camera. An L lens hitting a forehead would not make a pretty sight. So if you do this is a little tough. Nowadays, you could probably hold the camera over with these viewfinders that are flexible. You could do like this, but I didn't have that. I had to get over them and make sure I didn't drop my camera. Now, how do you frame that one? Well, you put it in a square frame, and depends what relatives are over that day. And you shift it around so their kid's at the top. Now, if they all come the same day, then you put it in the closet. Or you put a nail in the middle, and then you can spin it and have whatever face you want on there. Or try some different things. Black and white looks nice. Any of you ever do colorized black and whites in here? They're really easy to do. Talk to some of the mentors. We got a lot of mentors in this club. I could show you how to do that in less than 5 minutes. It's really easy to do, and it makes kind of a neat picture. Or if you got a natural frame, they were busting out rooms between my room and Renee's room, and I saw a hole where they busted out, and Channel 8 or somebody was filming her, and I shot through the hole. So, you know, use creative cropping like that or framing. Makes for a neat picture. Black and white, you can get some neat stuff off that. I had pretty good light there. I had a hair light, and I had double lights on that one. Or try sepia, black and white, color, different versions. And different f-stops give you different backgrounds. At 1.8, look at that's called a bokeh back there. Now I know Doug calls it a bokeh, right? And I call it bokeh, but it's the same thing. But notice the different effects you get. Same exposure on the face, but which do you like the best? Personally, if I had to choose one, I probably like the 2.8 one. But some of you might like the 1.8 or the f11, but it all depends on what you like. But the f-stops will give you different bokehs. Okay, so finally, what do we want in our pictures? We want sharp, well exposed, obviously. Well-focused, well-exposed, stay away from harsh shadows, good candids or well-posed pictures. Photoshop and Lightroom are real important, for me anyway. I don't take good pictures coming right out of the camera. I make good pictures out of pictures that are maybe average, at least I try to, and crop for best results. Didn't we have a cropping show here once? And be sure to look at that. Who did that?
Jackie.
Jackie. So look at Jackie. I'm sure has a fantastic program on cropping, but cropping can make the difference between night and day. But the key thing is to take a lot of pictures. Some are going to be great. Let's face it, you're going to have awful ones like I do. I probably have more awful pictures than anybody in the room here after shooting for 45 years. Luckily, with digital cameras and Photoshop, we can save or discard them before anybody else sees them. So everybody thinks we're wonderful. And the end, nope, this is the beginning of Better People Pictures. And that's all, folks.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.